Sir, very good morning and very happy to have you here. Sir,
Thank you.
let me start with Senior Counsel Mr. Kapil Sibal. Sir, at the outset, how do you view this amendment, constitutional amendment, bringing one nation, one election, and also please explain the way in which it was introduced in the Parliament?
Well, I think it's an ill-thought, ill-advised initiative that this government has taken. Without the kind of discussion that is required for the monumental change that they are seeking to bring about. Now, we all know that at the time when the Constitution was framed, the Constitution makers decided that whenever a government through the electoral process comes to power, through the voice of the people, it needs a certain amount of time for the people to analyze the government's functioning, whether they have fulfilled their promises or not, and make the government accountable. And in every democratic country, there is a fixed term of government, at the end of which the people of that country or of that state decide whether that government has fulfilled its promises or not, whether they have met the aspirations of the people, and whether the people should look for another set of people to form the government. And so in every democratic constitution, you have a fixed term. In some democratic constitutions, it is 5 years, in some it is 4 years, in one it is 6 years. So a fixed term is essential, and the leitmotif of our constitutional structure is that after 5 years, the people of the country or the people of the state, wherever the election takes place, will decide whether that government should come back to power or not, or whether the people are willing to choose another government. Now, the fundamental flaw in this one nation, one vote theory is that if the government loses the confidence of the House, whether it is the House in Lok Sabha or it is the Assembly in the state, then the election that will take place would be for the balance period, not for a fixed 5-year term. In other words, if a government loses power after 4 years, then another government will be elected only for 1 year. Now, this is contrary to the very basic feature of the Constitution. Because how will people judge in the course of 1 year whether the government has performed or not? Supposing at the end of 4 years a government falls. Now the parties who are in the assembly, who are in opposition, have to have a manifesto for the next 1 year. When will they prepare that manifesto? Then they'll have to give promises as to what they will do in 1 year, right? After which the notification is issued by the Election Commission. Then a time frame is fixed. That means the election will take place after 6 months. What will a government do in 6 months? So it is contrary to the basic feature of the Constitution. In other words, an assembly, they call it a midterm assembly. Now, when an assembly is constituted by the people, how could it be a midterm assembly? It has to be for a period of 5 years. And that's the fundamental theme. That's the thematic basis of our Constitution. So this is fundamentally against the basic features of the Constitution. So when they introduced the bill, they collected a set of people who are aligned to their ideology, set of lawyers and set of people. They never called leaders of the bar throughout the country, never discussed the issues with them, never discussed the consequences of such a monumental change that they are making, and introduced it in Parliament. And they have introduced only section 83(2) and 172, by which the 5-year term is not the fixed term anymore as far as the constitutional amendment is concerned. And this particular law is going to come into force much later, but the fact is it is fundamentally flawed.
Sir, before moving to Mr. Qureshi and Mr. Ram, from your answer, I have two fundamental questions on this. This amendment bill only introduced Article 82 capital A, amendment to Article 83 amendment to Article 172 and 327 of Constitution of India.
Yes.
Without amending Article 356 and Representation of People Act, will this one nation, one election amendment bill can be given effect to?
It is not going to be given effect to right away anyway, because it's only in 2034 that is going to be in effect to. What they intend to do is, because this doesn't require the 50% of the states to vote for it, because it's not a constitutional amendment under 368.
Yes.
So it doesn't require the assent of 50% of the assemblies, right? So it will be put into, once it comes into force, then they will amend 324A. And in 324A, they'll have to get the assent of all the states. After that, the Representation of People Act will be amended. But the Representation of People Act will not stand in the way of this constitutional amendment.
So, are you of the opinion that this amendment is brought in only to get away from the consent of the 50% of the states? So, partially...
No, to get rid of the 5-year term. How can you have an assembly which is elected by the people for 6 months or 1 year or 1.5 years? Under what this is against the basic structure of our constitution. In the absence of an adequate number of years for people to decide whether or not this government should come to power, right? How can you fix an assembly for, say, midterm assembly for 6 months or 1 year? It makes no sense.
Sir, Mr. Qureshi, we had the benefit of watching many of your interviews on this one nation, one election. Sir, first, what is your opinion in making only this is applicable to the state assembly elections and the parliament elections, leaving alone the panchayat elections? What would be the effect of it? Because originally they thought all the 3 elections have to be conducted together. That's the real meaning of one nation, one election. Why the parliament now or the government now left the panchayat elections out of this?
Yeah, that's a very important. You know, from the beginning, when Mr. Narendra Modi, even before becoming the Prime Minister, mooted this idea or flagged this idea, which had been on for a longer time, he talked of all 3 tiers as simultaneous election, all 3 tiers. And he asked for a national debate. National debate happened for 10 years. He wanted a consensus which did not happen. And after that, he didn't bother about the consensus and he decided to impose it on the nation. And Kovind committee was asked to just tell us how to conduct simultaneous election. They were not given the option to discuss the pros and cons of doing it. Now this committee, although the terms of reference of the committee very clearly say that simultaneous will mean all 3 tiers, but this committee's first recommendation, first explanation that, you know, we are talking of Lok Sabha and Vidhan Sabha first and Panchayat separate. That is not simultaneous election. And to say that you will have a Lok Sabha, Vidhan Sabha first and within 100 days there will be Panchayat election. Now, 100 days later is an entirely new election.
Yes.
Will require new arrangements. The word bandobast, the huge arrangement will have to be done afresh. So, where is the simultaneous election? So, I think they have not thought it through, and it will only have confusion and very adverse consequences.
Thank you, sir. Sir, Mr. Ram, the question is to you. Politically, how do you view this amendment being brought in and the relevancy of the time in which it is being brought?
Thank you. I think this project has to be seen in wider context, in the wider context of Hindutva authoritarianism, what it has done and what it is doing to institutions and to citizens' freedoms. You can say that one nation, first of all, it's an assault on the diversity and pluralism of India and Indian civilization, in fact, because we are multi-ethnic, multi-religious, multi-linguistic, multicultural, multi-political, It's multi-everything. So this is to impoverish the diversity and pluralism of India, and I've read carefully the views of our distinguished senior advocate and MP, a friend, Mr. Kapil Sibal, as well as Dr. Qureshi. First, he spoke to Karan Thapar in September of 2023, quite far-sighted at that time. All the issues are covered. You can say that the project, with some exaggeration, perhaps, is one nation, one election, one party, one leader, one language, one culture, one religion. This, with some exaggeration, defines the project. Mr. Kapil Sibal has gone into the nuances in the interview itself and in subsequent statements. For example, how this would incentivize horse trading and corruption in a big way. And he has also spoken, I won't get into the constitutional and legal areas, that's not my area of competence, but he has made it clear that the basic structure or features of the constitution would be impacted or assailed or whatever. I won't go into that, but that is clear. It's clearly against the spirit of the constitution. That much I can say. One important point here is, politically, it was raised by Burgess George, the senior journalist for The Hindu, last year, end of last year. And I quote from this, Karan Thapar, in fact, put it to Mr. Kapil Sibal in that interview, his views. And I quote, the proposed one nation, one election restricts the most fundamental freedom of expression in a democracy, that is voting. The most fundamental freedom in of expression in a democracy is the vote. So arguments for limiting elections are all arguments against democracy itself. I'm still quoting. Democracy may be messy, slow, and often undermines the collective interest of society, but if you go down that is a slippery slope. So instead of widening and deepening democracy and accountability, here you are narrowing it and regimenting it. That's the political objection, and of course, it's an assault on federalism. Dr. Ambedkar, I think, in the Constituent Assembly debate said states are sovereign in their own realm, or words to that effect. You are sovereign in your own realm, which is laid down, defined by the Constitution itself. And I think, of course, Mr. Kapil Sibal has correctly used the word quasi-federalism, so I take it as that's our system. So it is an assault on the right of people of various states. Take Tamil Nadu, for example, which is really exceptional. Even in the last Lok Sabha election, 40 out of 40, including Pondicherry, it's defied the so-called national trend. So have other places, above all Uttar Pradesh and Maharashtra and so on. So if you impinge on that, because they want to ride roughshod over the diversities and pluralism of India in an authoritarian fashion, that's the basic political objection.
You know, fundamentally, and I agree entirely with Mr. Ram, fundamentally the issue is, let's take country, we have 140 crore people. And with the number of states, there cannot be one policy for every state. If you take education, you take health, you will see that in every state, there is an element of diversity. Now, when an election happens in a state, the problems of the state are matter of public discourse nationally, right? Because the Prime Minister goes there, the leader of the opposition goes there, people start concentrating on the issues that are faced by Tamil Nadu people, by Andhra people, from Punjab people, depending on where the election takes place. So the problems of the people become a national issue, right? And each state deals with the problems separately. In a one nation, one election concept, the states will be not in the picture at all. Because there will be no debate as to what's happening in the state, because the national debate will take it over. So I entirely agree with N. Ram saying that this destroys the very federal structure of our country. And when we said the union, India is a union of states, That's the preamble of the Constitution. It's a union of states. Now you have diminished the state. You've destroyed the basic structure of the state. You are trying to one nation, one vote, one nation, one religion, one nation, one language, one nation, one man, one nation, one political party. That's what you're trying to do. You are destroying the very essence of our republic. And who talks about it? Nobody talks about it. And you get your own cronies to support the idea without having a national debate on it, with political parties being part of that debate, and you want to push it down our throats. I don't think that the people of India will tolerate this, and I'm sure the people of Tamil Nadu will not tolerate it.
Sir, just widening this argument. Sir, when simultaneous elections are happening, it's the view of you and Mr. Ram that the federal structure is affected because they debate on national issues and not on the state issues. Is there any other area of federalism is being affected because of these elections? One nation, one election. Other aspects of federalism?
No, I think every area is affected, sir. Every area. Which is the area which is not affected? Take education policy.
Yes, sir.
Take health. The problems in Tamil Nadu are different from the problem in Arunachal.
Correct.
Right? So how is that going to be dealt with? You see, how are people going to decide whether in that state the government has performed or not, if all that is going to happen is that the Prime Minister is going to come there 37 times, right, and give a speech and the same old speech 37 times, and nobody will print anything other than that 37 times. Where do we go from there?
Correct.
So this destroys the very essence of democratic functioning of our republic.
Sir, how these simultaneous elections will affect the enforcement of model code of conduct, sir? Is there any considerable effect on the model code of conduct?
Yeah, actually the excuse given for the proposal that model code of conduct leads to policy paralysis, everything comes to a standstill is totally wrong and false. Because I would request all of you to download the model code of conduct. It's just about 15 pages, a small booklet, and only thing which stops, the one thing, that no new policy will be announced. Why is it that the bright ideas for new schemes come to the mind of politicians only 2 weeks before the election, after they having been in power for 4 years and 11 months? So nothing comes to a standstill. And even a new scheme can be announced in an emergency, if the earthquake, flood or something, out with the permission of the Election Commission. Now, if this proposal is therefore insincere, because if you wanted to curtail the model code of conduct, why are you doing 7 or 8 phase election for the last 10 years? Even the elections of like Himachal and Gujarat used to be together for 20-30 years. They were separated by 22 days, which means model code got extended by 22 days. The life was paralyzed for 22 days. So where is the sincerity? So it is all humbug.
And who is following the model code of conduct? The political party in power and the center is not following it. You see distribution of cash every day in Delhi. Just you see that. Yes. Has anybody distribution of sarees, distribution of cash just before the election, and they are caught on camera? Who is following the model code of conduct? This model code of conduct is a moral code of conduct. And that moral code of conduct is absence when it comes to the party in power.
Sir, the union is propagating that this will cut down the expenses in a greater extent in conducting one nation, one election. That's the main argument made by the union. What's your opinion about the expenses for
expenses?
You know, the other argument given is by having simultaneous election, you will reduce the expenses. I have been suggesting, and if you are sincere, there is an alternative route. There is a ceiling on expenditure of candidates, but there is no ceiling on political parties. I am a candidate, I can spend 95 lakhs for my Lok Sabha election, but my party can spend 20 crores on me. So what happens to the ceiling? Impose a ceiling on political parties, and the expenditure will come down from 60,000 crores to 6,000 crores in one stroke if you are sincere. That's because that is not the point. They are spending so much of money. So if the idea is really to bring down the expenditure. And secondly, even this 60,000 crores, personally I feel it is very good for economy. Politicians' money is recycled and goes to the poor. The carpenter, the auto driver, the people who pay the posters. So what's wrong? So in fact the whole proposal lacks sincerity.
On the expenses, again, I've read Mr. Kapil Sibal, and one point that Dr. Qureshi made in an article in the Indian Express is that you'll require 3 times, you got to spend, have 3 times the number of EVMs and VVPATs in this election, and that's going to be huge. Now on expenses, this is the cost of democracy, so you can't really quarrel with that. But Indian elections are among the most expensive in the world, not so much because of the infrastructural requirements, the administrative requirements, because so much money is paid illegally by political parties to voters, spending on candidates and so on. Various estimates have been made, and we are among the most expensive. We are among the most expensive general elections in the world. So the expense thing completely is irrelevant, as Mr. Kapil Sibal told Karan Thapar in that interview. It's just an excuse. The other, and who follows the model code of conduct? That's the relevant question. We also saw the electoral bonds where there were quid pro quos involved, and the Supreme Court did well to strike it down, but I was disappointed that they didn't go far enough. I don't know what more they could have done, but you should have made them accountable. There was no penalty. There was no recovery of the money that had been spent. Maybe it was not feasible, I don't know. I'm not a lawyer. But we were disappointed by the fact, while it was a good thing it was struck down, it was unconstitutional, but the people who are involved in massive corruption were not held accountable in any way. So that falls to the ground. The argument that we will save costs. And the other point made by Dr. Qureshi in that article is, what about the staff? They'll be completely exhausted in this process. I have one more point which has not been raised perhaps in most articles. The Election Commission today, I think, lacks independence. Mode of appointment, their functioning, it's been widely criticized. I think Mr. Session deserves a lot of credit for bringing that into play. He may have overdone it. Then the multi-member Election Commission came. It was a big success. Dr. Qureshi and others, we will all testify to that, because there was give and take, there was a good teamwork, and now it's degenerated again. And in the latest round of assembly elections, they cited security concerns for not holding Maharashtra assembly elections along with Haryana and Chhattisgarh, I think. Now then, how do you propose to provide security? Are you going to use the Indian Army? Are you going to import international troops to police these elections? How do you propose to provide security all across the country? And how many days will it take? Will it all be on one day? This one election? I don't know.
No, I think that the subject is far more complex. You have to divide this into several parts. Number one, the money spent on the election itself. That's one part of it. Then the money spent on campaigning, which has nothing to do with the election itself, right? On the election itself, last time, 60,000 crores were spent, and this recent election, 1,35,000 crores. Now, and then the cap on the elections is on the candidate. there is no cap on the election as far as the party is concerned, right?
Correct.
You get the point?
Correct.
So therefore you have to deal with this subject and divide it into different parts. Unless you put a cap on party expenses, you're never going to be able to bring that down. So this argument of expenses is only expenses of the electoral process. It doesn't deal with expenses by the party in the election. And who has the maximum money in a party in the election? But those who float electoral bonds. And who gives them money? The corporate sector. And why does corporate sector give the money to the party in power? Because it gets favors, right? So therefore they will be able to muster much more money for that very process, and the excuse given is it will reduce the expenses in the electoral process. That's nonsense, as you know. And then unless you cap that expense, then the kind of cash that is spent, there is no, the election commission doesn't even talk about it. So this, and the point that he made, if you are holding an election for democracy, expense is not an issue.
Sir,
You know,
Mr. Krish.
one point which Mr. Enram had made is about the logistics. And the CEC is on record saying that there are 55 lakh EVMs that they are using currently. We'll need 3 times, which means 1 crore more EVM set, EVM VVPAT. The cost of one set is 35,000. 35,000 multiplied by 1 lakh, I can't even calculate, maybe somebody can quickly.
No, they can calculate.
Now, currently we recycle the same VVPAT and EVM. And in a simultaneous election, we'll have to have 3 times because they will all be used at the same time. Where is the money coming from? So the saving is not a real sincere proposal.
No, you also mentioned to me that at the moment you need 1,500 companies. In a one nation, one election, you need 3,000 to 4,000 companies. What is the expense of that?
Sir, before...
And yeah, another point which I would like to make is, with all the logic which is being given for simultaneous election, that work comes to a standstill, you should extend it to multi-phase election also. Why have 7-phase election in the current scenario, particularly in this social media age, where spread over 3 months, there is hate speech, there are rumors. So the time has come when we should do a single phase election, and I have written in some of my articles that it is possible to do it in 32, 33 days. Just all we need is more paramilitary companies. Instead of 1,500, 4,000 all at one go, and instead of 3 months, just give us for 1 month.
Sir, before going to the logistics of conducting simultaneous elections and the number of EVMs required and whether they are reliable or not, that's a different question altogether. Sir, what is the, how do we consider this bill, amendment bill, vis-a-vis Schedule 10, sir? Whether the horse trading will happen?
No, that will not be covered.
Sir.
That will not be covered. Schedule 10 is a different scheme under the Constitution altogether.
Correct, sir.
So that's not going to be covered. That will be separate altogether. They also say in this, they also say that there's an exception. So you can have an exception, for example, in Jammu and Kashmir. You don't want an election, you will not have an election. What happens if 356 is imposed? Has anybody thought about that?
That's my next question.
If 356 is imposed, Article 356, then what happens? And then look at it from the point of view of the elected legislator. Supposing after 3 years the government falls. Now, we know statistically that 50% of those who are elected will not be elected again.
Correct.
That's the norm.
Sir.
50% will not be elected. So those, if the government falls after 3 years, no member of the Legislative Assembly or Parliament would want to go for another election.
Exactly, sir.
Want to go for another election because he can't afford to spend 200 crores, 300 crores, especially in this part of the country, right? So how, therefore, there will be an incentive not to have an election as far as the legislators are concerned, right? Therefore, there will be perpetuity of a government which has lost the confidence of the people.
Correct.
This is disastrous for democracy.
The other side of it, sir. Now, Schedule 10, if 3/4 of the legislature forms a separate group, they are not coming under the wise of Schedule 10. Now, because of this one nation, one election, will it not discourage 3/4 of the legislature, though they want to have a different leader?
That's what's going to happen. That's what's going to happen. What's going to happen is that those who want to make sure that even if they have lost power, they will perpetuate this thing. They will use the 10th schedule.
Correct.
And the way they have used it now, they've been using it for years. They will use it. They will use it. And therefore the government will never fall, even if it has lost the confidence of the people. On the ground, that's what's going to happen. So all these issues have never been discussed, either in Parliament or outside Parliament or through a national debate or amongst the legal fraternity, and I'm so glad, I congratulate you, at least you've started a public discussion on it.
Sir, politically, BJP especially had a majority during their second term. They have not chosen to bring this amendment in the second term. Now in the third term, when they don't have actual majority, they have support of only 2 other political parties. Why do they choose, or how do you view this, that the timing of this introduction of the amendment?
Well, Mr. Modi made the promise in 2013, I think, that he was going to do it, and it's well known that it's part of their agenda, the Hindutva agenda, or the Hindu Rashtra project, if you like, unitariness. Yes, the ground has shifted under Mr. Modi's feet because of the outcome of the Lok Sabha election. They do not have a majority, and there are two parties with formidable leaders, particularly in the south. Mr. Chandrababu Naidu, who extends support. They are dependent on them, otherwise the government will fall, unless they do horse trading and get somebody else. So it's a weakened government, but they want to show that they are as strong as before, that this is a temporary obstacle, a temporary setback, and therefore they want to assert they want to be aggressive, they want to go on the offensive on this. Now whether it will get through, who knows? They don't have the numbers, but that's where horse trading comes in. And the BJP has shown a lot of innovation of their people in getting around or finding loopholes, what they did on Jammu and Kashmir to alter the status and so on. They've shown a lot of innovation. Maybe others also in the past have done that. You can get around constitutional provisions. You can, if the Supreme Court, again, the role of the Supreme Court, Mr. Kapil Sibal spoke about it to Karan Thapar in their interview. They are the doctors who've got to fix it. If they don't, and I can say as a lay person that I'm personally disappointed with the performance of the Supreme Court overall in this period. Some critics have said that it is in the process of becoming an executive court, maybe an exaggeration. I don't want to get into it, but we are disappointed by, they're not taken up major issues. But there have also been good interventions, as in the electoral bonds to the extent it is. I think they've not provided enough relief, and there have been attacks on freedom of speech and expression, on journalists and so on. So it's a mixed record. I'm not competent to evaluate it carefully. But I think we look up to the Supreme Court. Even today, newspaper reports say that the Supreme Court has given a sort of ultimatum to the governor of Tamil Nadu. Yes. Sort it out, otherwise we'll resolve it.
Yes.
Because he has been one of the worst governors in the country, along with Arif Muhammad Khan. I think if you want me to single out two highly partisan governors, and this is no secret, we say it all the time, it's Mr. Ravi and Mr. Arif Muhammad Khan. The way they behave, their style, he tried to change the name of the state.
Yes, sir.
And so on. So we have a real problem there, and I think, we have to see if he's a member of parliament, maybe he can he can speculate on the chances of this getting through.
No, I have absolutely no doubt that the Supreme Court will take this very, very seriously. Because I am convinced that it violates the very basic feature of our Constitution. Because you are now truncating the life of an assembly which has been elected. And you are saying that this election will take place only and the government will be in power only for 1 year. But that in a democracy, nowhere in the world is that in any constitution contemplated. So I have no doubts about it. And apart from that, I don't think they have the numbers, the 2/3 majority they will not get when it comes to the constitutional amendments.
Sir, coming to you, sir, about the logistics. Sir, will you please explain more how these EVMs are going to be manufactured and how many EVMs are required? In Tamil Nadu, there are about 68,000 polling stations. Now, if more than 16% are going to contest in one election, we require 2 ballot units. So, if this is going to be a simultaneous election, how at all it is possible for the Election Commission to supply these number of machines? That's one question.
Yes. As I mentioned, my calculation used to be that we have about 2.5 million, 24 lakh EVM. But CEC clarified recently in a press conference that there are 55 lakh EVMs which are being used, whatever the calculation. Now, we will need 3 times that number.
Okay.
3 times that number means 1 crore more sets will have to be produced. It will take time to manufacture because there are only 2 companies which make it. And as I said, the cost of one set is 35,000 rupees. It will be lakhs of crores. So this is not saving the money, this is spending more money, and then we will not need more staff, because if there are 3 machines being operated in the polling station, currently we have 5 people, we will need probably 7 or 8 people. Already we are running short of government staff. The law says they have to be government servants. When we started falling short of getting government servants, we changed the law to include bank employees, university employees, so that we can have a more catchment area. Now to increase the number by 30-40% more, where will we get the manpower? It will be a problem. So all these things have not been examined in detail and need to be worked out.
But you know, expense according to me is not a fundamental issue in this case.
Sir, I'm not on expenses.
They will impose an EVM cess on the people of this country.
No, I'm not on expenses, sir.
Expense is not an issue. I think there are more fundamental democratic issues.
No, sir, I'm not on expenses. My question is not on expenses, sir. How to handle these number of machines? Sir, it's very difficult to, we are practically seeing.
That they can manage that. I mean, how do they manage to collect 6,000 crores, 7,000 crores through electoral bonds? We never imagined that they would be able to do it. That they can do.
Sir,
I think there are huge constitutional issues.
Correct, sir.
That are far more significant.
Sir, so one perception on this is, once if they enact this law, slowly they will make this country into a presidential form of election rather than the present setup. Is it possible? Or
I think it's already a presidential form of election in this country.
No, the Prime Minister's office will not be there.
No, you mean to say that they will change the let's get over this hurdle before we talk of that. But in form, it is still presidential. Because it is presidential because of the media, because of mainstream media.
Sir.
Because the mainstream media does not present the other point of view, right? It's obsessed with our very photogenic Prime Minister. So what do we do? I mean, this is already a presidential form of government.
So, what all be the ill effects of this amendment? In fact, constitutionally you have said. Otherwise, practically, we have talked.
No, the legal effects of this conference is that the diversity in India will become irrelevant as far as the political diversity is concerned. Issues of the states will become irrelevant, right? They will start talking about what great things whichever government has done. If Modi ji continues, he will just talk about how the economy has grown when it has not, how India's influence has grown when it has not, how the whole world respects what India is doing, they may not. Right? So that's what will happen. the issues regarding states will become irrelevant in a national election or one vote, one election, and that's destructive of our republic. That's my basic thought.
Sir,
I also agree that we can't quarrel with expense when it comes to deepening and widening democracy. I think he's absolutely right. Democracy is messy, it is expensive, it is imperfect, but there is no other way. It's a very imperfect form of governance, but there is no other way, and we have chosen it. So I fully agree with Mr. Sibal on that we cannot have any objections on the, comparing costs and on the basis. Go for democracy wholeheartedly.
One of their arguments is that there's a policy paralysis. If you have frequent elections, there is a policy paralysis. If there's no frequent election in the Lok Sabha, there's been a policy paralysis for 15 years. What have they done in 15 years? There have been no frequent elections in India, and the government has not fallen. So if for 15 years they have done nothing, then what policy paralysis they're talking about? There's a policy paralysis in the government of India without frequent elections.
Sir, what is the difference you consider? The reports of various commissions or committees on this one nation, one election, how the last committee has departed from the earlier views of the on one nation.
The last committee has departed from the earlier views of the committee.
Earlier committees.
Earlier committees.
No, actually, for the last 10 years, many committees have gone into this issue and none of them could find a solution, which is when the government decided that if there is no consensus, let it be, we are going to impose it anyway. And COVID committee, as I said, was given no option to go into the pros and cons. They say you just have to tell us how to do it. And their recommendations are so faulty, so erratic, that they are almost laughable.
The recommendations.
Also,
First of all, I am very disappointed that they asked the ex-president of India to chair this committee.
Yes.
It's a matter of great disappointment. I think that Rashtrapati Kovind-ji should not have accepted it. And what do you tell an ex-president of India? Now you tell us how it's going to be implemented. Are ex-presidents of this country meant to implement a diktat of the government? Are you reducing that constitutional position and the person who occupied it to that level? That means that as far as national consensus is concerned, it is absent. But because he has been the president, we'll tell him how to implement it. This is itself very problematic. That means a political party is forcing its agenda, not a consensus after a national debate. This also is the fundamental flaw.
Sir. Yeah, I would also like to pose a question. Suppose we have created the simultaneous elections by constitutional amendment and whatsoever. What if the Lok Sabha falls as it did in 13 days in Vajpayee's time? So what will happen to 28 states which have come with absolute majority? Why should they be made to go through another election? So it makes no sense. And actually, only this morning a thought came to my mind. It is like Sati. There was a time when husband died, wife had to die also.
Yes.
If Lok Sabha falls, all other states have to fall also. What is this logic? It makes no sense to me.
No, let's, for example, forget this amendment. Let's take a case that today Parliament passes a law and says that the term of the assembly will be 1 year.
Correct.
Will it be constitutional?
No.
If it will not be constitutional, how can a term of an assembly for 1 year at the end of 4 years, if the government falls, be constitutional?
Correct.
Can't be. So the logic fails. So the whole logic of a mid-term assembly is anathema to democracy.
Sir, how do you consider this S.R. Bommai's case? We'll have around 356.
What will S.R. Bommai's case?
No, the one nation, one election. Will it have any effect on 350?
That's my position. It's my position that federalism is a basic structure of the constitution. This violates federalism ex facie. I mean, this is contrary to every concept of democratic functioning. That you decide the term of an assembly which the people of that state has elected.
Correct.
and you decide on their term. How can that be? And that the executive has done it through a process which is unconstitutional.
Sir, now if the term of the parliament comes to an end in the middle, then the sir's view is the election of the assembly is for 1 year. If the parliament comes to is dissolved within 3 years, and the parliament's election have to be conducted for 2 years period, and how do you view that, the other side of the coin?
I think it's anathema. It goes against, as he has explained, the basic structure of the constitution, federalism or quasi-federalism, and against representativeness itself. And I suppose that's there. I mean, the question was, if Parliament itself...
So 3 years, then the election have to be conducted only for remaining 2 years. So sir was explaining this case vis-a-vis the state legislatures. Then if Parliament election is conducted for only for 2 years, how do you view that? Same.
Yeah.
Okay.
Parliament loses confidence, the government loses confidence after 3 years. How can you have a parliament with 2-year term? I mean, the same logic will apply whether it's the state or it's parliament. You
Sir.
see, fundamentally in a democracy, the democracy functions on accountability. Accountability depends on a term given to a particular party which is in power. That term has to be a fixed term. Why? Because after a fixed term, you can decide, people can decide whether it has fulfilled its promises or not. But that fixed term can't be 1 year or 2 years. It has to be a sufficient period of time to test accountability. That, under the Constitution, was 5 years. You cannot tinker with that.
Sir, coming to these recommendations, have the report of the President Govind's committee.
Yes.
Sir, the recommendations are not supported by any reasonings. Sir, 18,000 pages, but the
reasons are the will of Narendra Bhai. They have decided to do it, they will do it.
Sir.
Like they did in, other things, electoral bonds, Jammu Kashmir, they decided to do it. That was part of their agenda. This is also part of their agenda.
Sir, I request you to give your other views on this matter so that we can take some questions from the audience also.
So I think, to sum up, at least I think that this is an assault on democracy itself. It's an assault on the basic feature of the Constitution, basic structure of the Constitution, in the sense Mr. Sibal has explained it, that about the fixed term. It's an assault on federalism, because each state is sovereign in its own realm under the Constitution, even if it's quasi-federal, because the centre has certain overriding powers. But the Bombay case has sort of modified that to some extent, hasn't it? That you have to go to the to Parliament before you can dissolve and so on. 1991, is it? So, and it's not going to work. In that interview, Mr. Kapil Sibal, in fact, proclaimed that this will be the downfall
of
the Modi government. And whether that comes true or not, we shall see. But will they get it through? I don't know.
And that will be the only good effect of the amendment. That will be the only benefit of the amendment.
This is a grand folly, I think. That's my last word on it. A grand exercise in political folly.
Sir.
The downfall is going to happen before 2034, I can tell you that.
Sir, your concluding views on the One Nation?
No, I think it's an immature, ill-thought, anti-democratic process that has started. It seems as if democracy is now been throttled by antediluvian ideas of a political ideology which never believed in democracy at the time of independence, never participated in the democratic processes, never believed in the constitution that we talked about today. And if somebody who supports the party, who's the head of an organization, says to the people of this country that true independence came when the Ram Mandir was built, you can now imagine as to what their thought processes are. So, in fact, I believe that the people of India should realize they are moving towards an era when their democratic rights will slowly no longer exist.
Sir.
And that's very dangerous for our republic.
Yeah.
Before Dr. Qureshi, I think the role of the DMK and parties which believe in federalism and democracy is going to be very important in this, and you should take a, I'm very happy that so many lawyers are here in this round table and for this whole conference, because this is going to be very important in this. And even the allies of the BJP, for example TDP, it's not it's not a weak party. We hope that, because Mr. Naidu in the past has emphasized the rights of states and so on, Chief Minister Chandrababu Naidu, so I think they can also think about it. This is the political point. I think that this message has to be taken right across the political spectrum. Nobody better to do it than Mr. Sibal, because he is also a political leader and has been in government, the cabinet. But people, we'll all join in. But the role of the DMK in this, I think, cannot be, the importance of that cannot be overemphasized. And I'm sure you, as the secretary of the person in charge of the legal wing, have a special responsibility. So thank you for this opportunity for us.
No, I entirely endorse Ram's view on this. And if you want us to participate in a national movement against this very concept, we'd be willing to participate and go with you.
Sir, I agree with you that the responsibility on me as a secretary of legal wing is very heavy. But as long as sir is leading us, it will be a very easy and task.
It'll be my pleasure.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would like to mention that the COVID committee has said that they received 21,500 responses. But it has been pointed out that the questionnaire was sent only in Hindi and English. Why not in Tamil, Telugu, Malayalam? So they say 80% people responded in favor, because they were all from Hindi belt. If it had been sent to all the language zones, the responses would have been different.
No, not only on the Hindi belt, their own people.
Yeah. And finally, I would say that they can do only two things by way of reform. One, put a ceiling on political party expenditure.
Correct.
One problem is taken care of. And do away with multi-phase election. You can do it in 33 days. Just give us more paramilitary forces. The thing will change drastically.
Thank you, sir. Shall I ask the audience to...
A few questions, yes.
Yeah. Sir, is Mr. T.K. Silangovan or...
Yagnik got in touch with me, so I'll be doing.
So Mr. T.K. Silangovan, our former...
Yes.
Good morning, everybody. I am T.K. Silangovan, former member of Rajya Sabha and Lok Sabha. The bill was introduced. It is a constitution amendment bill which was introduced now. But I see that 196 members have opposed the bill, which means more than one-third have opposed the bill, which means the constitution amendment bill needs two-thirds majority in the House. Now that more than one-third have opposed the bill, this is one point. Secondly, we had seen a parliament election in 1996. Then another one in 1998 and another one in 1999. Three parliament elections were held within a space of 3 years. Will all the assemblies be dissolved and elections will be conducted, and then what is the purpose of the government saying that expenditure will be reduced by one nation, one election policy?
But there are two answers to your question. On the first question that 196 members have opposed, this is not an amendment under 368. For this amendment under the 83(2) and 172, you can pass it in Parliament by a simple majority. So that's not an issue. It's only when you come to 324, the one poll issue, that you need under 368, 50% of the states to assent. So on your first question, it's not a problem. On the second question, there will be 17 states in this country, if this becomes law, whose terms will be truncated through law.
Yes.
17 states whose 5-year terms will be truncated. If 5 years is a basic feature of the constitution, they can't even do that. That's the answer to your second question.
Next, this government has no majority, that we know. They are running with the support of two major parties. If these two major parties withdraw their support, this government will fall. So, will there be, all the assemblies dissolved and elections will be conducted along with this house? Recently, Karnataka, some of the states had gone for polls within 3-4 months back. One thing. Secondly, we know how the states were dissolved. We had seen that a fax machine could dissolve a state legislature in Kashmir. The governor, without calling the chief minister, whose one party had withdrawn their support, the governor should have called the chief minister and asked the chief minister to prove the strength in the house. But another party extended support. They sent a fax letter to the governor. He says that fax machine did not work, so I have dissolved the assembly. So these things have also happened in this country. So they don't want states to be run by opposition parties. Modi's idea is that the entire country should be ruled by one party, that is BJP.
But that's obvious because he talks about double-engine sarkar. What is a double-engine sarkar? Means only that there should be only one party, both in the state and in the center.
He is not a king. It is for the people to decide. Our Tamil Nadu people have not allowed BJP entry into the state.
But he is not a king in Tamil Nadu, but he is a king somewhere else.
Take Kerala. Many of the states, they don't want BJP to come into their state.
I know that.
Then how can he say that? How can this be possible? And how the constitution is treated? We have to tell the people first. India's pride lies in its unity in diversity.
Yes.
So that should be maintained and preserved. Thank you, sir.
Mr. Elangovan, I would like to point out with great anxiety what they did in Kashmir. With one stroke, it became a union territory. Can't they do it to Tamil Nadu tomorrow?
There is a legal point also, sir.
That's why I said India is a union of states. No state can be reduced to a union territory with a union of states.
Not only that, sir. There, Article 370 should be abolished only by a resolution of the passed by the state legislature. That has not happened.
That's history.
Next.
Thank you, sir.
Next. Give your name and. Sir,
Good morning to you all. My name is Shanmuga Sundaram. I was former member of Parliament Rajya Sabha. I am a senior advocate. My question is addressed to Mr. Qureshi. Sir, I want to know why elections in some states are held in several phases. Tamil Nadu, of course, they conduct in one phase. Other states, some of the even smaller states, they conducted maybe 5 or 7 phases. The supplement is, if they can't hold it in a single phase, and how can they hold a national, one nation, one election?
Yeah, that's a very good question, but in fact the example is in Tamil Nadu itself. For the last 40 years, Tamil Nadu and West Bengal, equal size states, go to the poll at the same time. Tamil Nadu is always done in one phase and West Bengal is done in 7 phases because the ground realities are different.
Why?
Here, law and order is not the issue. Here, money is the issue. There, bombs and guns are the issue. Therefore, we require paramilitary forces, and which is what we have been saying since the beginning of this. That if only paramilitary companies, which used to be about 1,500 or so, if 4,000 companies can be given to us, instead of 3 months, only for 1 month. So multi-phase election must be abandoned now, particularly in this age of social media, because a prolonged election will mean more money spent and also more hate, fake news, rumors, which is doing a lot of damage. So the time has come to do it, and it is doable if the government decides that they can do it in 30 seconds. Thank you, sir.
Sir, I am advocate and additional public prosecutor in Coimbatore. I ask one more question. One nation, one election. The Supreme Court take any action to suo motu regarding this issue?
I doubt it. Somebody will have to move the Supreme Court. I don't expect Supreme Court to take suo motu action.
Sir, good morning. My question is, first question is, one nation, one election, whether we are apprehension or that it leads to presidential form of election, it will go to presidential form of type of government is thinking, it is making their policies like that, one nation, one election, whether it leads to presidential form of election. My second question is, what is the defect in presidential form? In US, it is running, only presidential is there. United States of America is governed by single person. Why can't we have, whether there is any difficulty for presidential election?
See, I think that we, when we look at our own constitution and its functioning, we forget one basic feature which is different from all other democracies. In all other democracies, and if you notice, say in the US or Australia or Canada or in the UK, the treasury benches, that is the political party in power, reaches out to the opposition to pass a bill. What is the reason? The reason is that in those countries, there is no such thing as a whip. A whip in a democracy is only issued in two circumstances. First, when the budget is to be passed. Then a whip is issued to make sure that the budget is passed, otherwise the government falls. And two, when there is a no confidence motion against the government, then the whip is issued to ensure that the no confidence motion is defeated. In no other case can a whip be issued, right? In India, we are already a presidential form of government because the whip is issued in every case, in any bill, on any discussion, on any debate. In other words, a member of parliament today has no freedom to express his views. He has to express the views of the party, and in this case the party in power, and in this case the leader. So we already have a presidential form of government functioning in this country, right? Unless you take out the concept of a whip and say that a member of the political party will not be disqualified if he speaks in the House against a bill that is introduced by his own party. Unless that happens, that's fundamental in democracy. Unless that happens, we are here functioning in a controlled democracy. And that controlled democracy, when a political party is so powerful, it has an absolute majority, it's presidential form. What other form is there? But even in a presidential form of government, you have the treasury benches reaching out to the opposition. That doesn't happen even in our own country. So in fact, we should all understand that this kind of democracy is not good for the republic.
Sir?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. My question is to our living legend, Kapil Sibal ji. Only one question first. Will a PIL lie in Supreme Court against this one election, one nation?
I think that's better to go to a medicine shop and get a pill and swallow it instead of going to Supreme Court.
How to thwart this?
We'll fight it out. I will fight it out. Not to worry.
Hope will not end in an emergency like before by this move.
To uphold the rule of law is my commitment in life, and I always stand up for the right thing, which I believe is right. And I think that we all lawyers, at least the modern day lawyers, have forgotten that law is a service. That lawyers are meant to serve the community. Unfortunately, in recent years, law has become a business. People look at law as a means of earning money. In fact, that's a completely wrong approach that modern lawyers adopt when they enter the profession of law. The pleasure that it gives me when serving somebody to whom I bring relief is worth crores of rupees. I just want to see a smile on his or her face and to say, thank God that I have been able to help this individual. That's the way we must look at this profession. And I know that Ilango, my friend, and all of you here will agree with me, and he follows this practice, that we are all here to serve the community. In the absence of the service, the rule of law itself is diminished. Thank you very much for having me here. All the best to all of you.
Vote of thanks by Mr. I. Paranaman, our Joint Secretary.
Respected Rajya Sabha member and senior advocate Mr. Kapil Sibal sir, respected former Chief Election Commissioner Mr. S.Y. Qureshi, and our beloved senior Hindu N. Ram sir, I would like to thank on behalf of the DMK legal wing lawyers for come forward to Chennai and address your valuable suggestions and ideas about this roundtable session on One Nation, One Election. First of all, as a conclusion of this discussion is concerned, I would like to thank all the three distinguished delegates that on 3 points. One, this roundtable conference has clarified the One Nation, One Election concept with regard to the constitutionally, whether it will withstand on constitutionally. You are discussed touching the SR Bombay case and as well as the question of the Article 356. And number 2 is that expenditure. Expenditure is concerned, you are on clear, clarified and distinguished expenditure on the party and expenditure on the election commission. You are categorically said in this dais that the expenditure with regard to the party is nothing to do with the expenditure on the election commission. And third thing is logistic. When the election commission, here of course we have luckily the former chief election commissioner here, when the One Nation, One Election come to the force, already when we have an election for a whole nation, even for a state assembly election on several manners as we have discussed here, how could it possible all the aspects you have been discussed here, you are lightened to all the advocates about the effect of the One Nation and One Election. And moreover, I would like to thank our senior advocate Mr. N.R. Lirango, who had put questions as a voice of the common man, who all have the doubts with regard to the One Nation, One Election. All the form of questions have been formulated through Mr. N.R. Lirango. But one thing, Mr. Kapil Sibal sir, I have attracted on your one valuable point. Thing is that if a state got dissolved in 3 years, the 50% of the members will not be able to interested to contest because
It doesn't apply to yours.
Because that's a back. Because being a sitting member, it's a point of our thought you have been expressed here. So I would like to thank. I think this conference had thrown a light to the nation. As our distinguished delegates have spoken here, this is the first conference in India where the huge number of lawyers gather under one roof who spoke about the One Nation, One Election. No doubt for the first amendment in the constitution, the voice was raised from the Tamil Nadu. Now for the first conference to agitate the one nation, one election is also voice arisen from Tamil Nadu. Thank you for one and all for coming here to the Chennai and give our valuable address. Thank you for giving this opportunity, Mr. Elango also. Thank you.